this week's theme is Knight Combat. I'm just going to do all of the pieces 1 week at a time. And my goal with these themes is to show you ideas and plans and things we haven't really discussed. I mean, we might have some things pop up that you've seen before, but generally speaking, I would like you to learn new things about pieces. There's a whole lot of stuff about each chess piece that we've never even talked about because it's impossible to talk about everything. So we do our best. But anyway, let's look. We'll do knight tactics today and maybe some checkmates to show you. So in this example, we're going to look at this knight on G1. The knight on G1 does some interesting things in this game. So here we go. And oh yeah, let me expand the box so that we can see who's playing. Because I know some people like to see that. All right, so here we go. So anyway, we're pretty much mostly just paying attention to how the knights operate. It's pretty common. Most of the time, the knights will develop attacking, the center squares like this, or if I do the other side, if the knight's on c6, it looks like that. That's pretty normal. So this knight comes in. Now, this knight move is okay to play here, but I don't really recommend this knight move most of the time because it can kind of mess up your pawn structure a little bit. But the point is, if this knight takes here and he takes back, where does this knight go? If he goes to the edge, you would lose a pawn like this. That would be very bad. And now there's a checkmate threat. So you can't really do that. So at this point, you can go forward. But if you go here, they can attack you. And now your only safe square is here. And then h5 wins the knight. Because the knight... Oh, no, actually it does not win the knight. Because the knight can go to e3. But yes, if you did play h5, the knight would have to go to e3, and now everything is kind of blocked up after this move because they're attacking right here. So we would do this and that, and now everything's safe. But you see, this knight is in a really weird spot. This is not good for white. So taking the knight on e4 doesn't really work very well right now. So instead, white castles, which makes a bit more sense.
You do have a question if you want.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't want to go too far or we'll lose track.
So, like, if you trade the knight, right?
Yep.
So right now, and then the knight moves to e5, and then, to e5, and then the pawn attacks, and then, you go back to there. But then the e pawn could go to e5.
Yes, that is another possibility. You're correct.
Then you could win a pawn and get two strong pawns.
Yeah, it actually might even be worse than that because basically if you move here, which black can force it, and then they go here, now you have to move the knight again. And again, if you move forward, well, you're just going to get attacked more, so that's no good. So you probably have to move backwards. And yeah, this is not going to be good. So yeah, this is very bad. I agree with you. I think anything you do there is bad. There's actually a third possibility too of just moving the knight backwards, but this is also bad because now you're like undeveloped.
I have to redevelop the knight.
Yep. So yeah, so there's three good reasons not to take this knight. I agree with you. Good job, sir. All right. So, any other questions, Coach Simons?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So, they castle, and now this queen c2 move is aimed at eliminating the knight with the knight, so like if black does nothing, so now this is what it's aiming to try to do, but of course, black supports their knight in the middle of the board. So, so far the knights have had a lot of activity in this game. So white kind of does the same thing. This is kind of a neat move because the bishop pins the knight. So like if this knight were to take here, we could actually take the bishop and then we're going to win the rook as well. So that actually pins the knight. You could even say this is a discovered pin because the bishop cannot see the knight or the dark square or the light square bishop on black side. But when the knight moves, the bishop discovers that it's pinning them, which is kind of weird to think about. It's also adding a third attacker to the e4 square when there's only 2 defenders. So knight e5 is actually a pretty cool move here. So black decides to take here anyway, thinking they can get away with it. Part of the idea is if you take here, you can play knight takes check to save your knight. The king would probably have to move. And then you could go here, threatening the queen. So the queen would probably go here. And then they would develop like this. So basically, while black did get the rook, the knights are very strongly posted and they have won several pawns. And this is a support square for the knight. It'll become a support point once a pawn actually defends there. So again, lots of interesting knight moves there as well. Okay, so anyway, so what white decides to do is take here and not go for all the traps that could happen if they go for the rook. It looks pretty cool, but it doesn't quite work, I guess. All right, so queen c8. Here we go. And you'll see this is the knight we're supposed to be watching because he does some pretty interesting stuff here in a moment. All right, so as you can see, we are moving around. We're only concerned with the knight moves. So here we're making some minor threats, although it is defended. But black decides to attack the knight instead of allowing the pawn to fall. And now this knight finds this really great square. Look at this knight. He supports 2 pawns, so if they're ever attacked or anything, the knight can support them. But also, he is attacking this f5 pawn from a position of safety. Like, you can't... Black doesn't have a way to attack this knight. Like, if they try to use the bishop, they might trade bishops. And how the heck does this knight ever attack? He'd have to get to g4. How would he do that? He'd go knight f6 and then to g4. But in the meantime, you could play h3 to prevent knight g4. So there's really no way to attack this knight. So this is a really strong spot for that knight. And so after bishop f6, you see the rook guards the pawn, but then when bishop f6 happens, the rook can't see the pawn anymore. Now here's the spot where black overlooked. They take the bishop with a discovered attack on the knight, but then the knight captures attacking the queen. The queen retreats with attack, and then the knight retreats with a capture and an attack on the bishop. So the bishop goes away. So the white knight captured 3 pawns, but white gave up a bishop. And therefore, at least I think it was a bishop. Was it a bishop or a knight? Yeah, it was a bishop. Okay. So yeah, they gave up a bishop for 3 pawns. Well, we're about to see something very familiar that we're used to seeing. Look at this. 4 pawns in the middle. Those of you who have been with us for a while will recognize that this is considered a big pawn center. When you've got 3 or 4 pawns that can all see the middle at the same time. See, all these can mostly see the middle. This front pawn actually can't see the middle anymore, but he is in the middle. But this is just going to become a monster. As these pawns roll down the board, there's not a lot that black can do about it. The other thing we've taught you all about big pawn centers is they're very good at pushing pieces out of the way. So, like, if this were to happen, the bishop would have to leave. If this were to happen, the knight would have to leave. You see what I mean? These pawns can move forward and kick pieces away. So, they try to stop it, but they don't. So basically, this knight captured 3 pawns and gave up a bishop, but those 3 pawns happen to be really mobile pawns in the middle that can rush down the board. So, there they go. You see? In fact, this pawn is so powerful that it's attacking the knight that black moves here, making a threat, but they're not even worried about losing a knight here. Just because it's such a... once you come here, you're threatening this knight, you're threatening checkmate. There's all kinds of problems here. So they don't even worry about moving it because that pawn is so powerful. They'd rather it just get out of the way. But white doesn't fall for that. Now here's kind of a neat move. The rook just moved where the bishop can take it. So they've given up not only a knight, but also, or not only a bishop, but also a rook now. But watch how powerful this knight becomes. So first of all, here's the threat. If they do a nothing move like this, check, you'll see this king can't move because the rook guards the only square he can move to. So your only square that you can move to is lose your queen. That's no good. So they have to stop this. They have to stop it by playing rook g7. So then they take the knight instead. Because if you go here, either they could do this and you would lose 2 pieces, or they could take the or they could just not do that, and they're okay. They could play their king over, for example, because the rook got out of the way. So there's a couple of ways this could be handled, but the best way, I think, is the one that was chosen, where you just take the knight, and now we play queen to here, knight to here. You see, it looks like the rook is butting the queen out of the way, but this powerful knight blocks the way. You'll notice that a lot of the really cool knight moves in this game are the knight working with pawns. The pawns are helping out. So here we go. Once again, we've got these 3 powerful pawns plus this knight. The knight's also threatening the rook there. It might even be a good idea to just get rid of the darn knight and just go get the pawns. That's probably better than what happened in the game. So here we go. And here comes some really fancy knight moves. So this knight move attacks the rook. So he goes down. You also notice that it also attacked the pawn on a7. But we're not worried about that pawn because the thing that's going to win the game is these 2 pawns, not taking a pawn over here suddenly. So it's better to move this forward. Now we're threatening this pawn. This threatens the knight. Or I'm sorry, the knight threatens the rook. If the rook were to move, you could make a queen, for example. And then now white is just winning. So that's one possibility. However, he sacrifices for the pawn instead. But instead of taking this for free, which he could have done, there's nothing wrong with this move, actually. He actually plays this check. And this is a really cool check because this rook down here is threatening to take a bunch of pawns, and it keeps white's king from coming into the game. So taking that rook is much better because now you have a piece and black doesn't. So this was a really good game. It shows how if the knight gets in the position, especially backed up by pawns, it's really difficult to fight against the knight, even if you're a higher value piece like a rook. I would say this knight was as powerful or more powerful than rooks in this game. All right, do we have any questions about the knight in this particular game?
Doesn't look like it.
No problem. Okay. All right, so in this game, oh, I forgot to mark which knight we're paying attention to. No problem, we'll find out. It's one of white's knights, or maybe both. Okay, so we're pretty much just looking for fancy knight moves. Okay, so here's the first one. Many of you have probably seen this kind of move before. Typically, I discourage this kind of move, but there's a reason to do it in this position. So basically, black makes a pawn move, stopping the bishop and the knight from coordinating at the f7 square. But the reason they moved this knight out of the way is so they could play f4, because the knight was blocking the pawn. So that allows the knight to have a purpose for going there, so it was fine. So here we are. Once again, new threat. The idea is to move the knight there with a fork on 2 pieces, potentially. So they castle. And so, again, you can see the knight is aiming at 3 critical spots. See, on the first idea, if the knight goes here, well, actually, let's do a silly move. All right, here's a silly move, just for example. So first of all, we're threatening to win a pawn, and that's just a really good move. The second thing we're doing is we're threatening to have a really strong knight in the position permanently. That's really hard to get rid of. You could play knight c8 potentially, but I also made a silly move, and I'm not sure what they would actually do. But also knight f6 is really powerful, because if they take, all you have to do to win this game is bring your queen in like this, or you could do an alternate path like this, or those are a little longer. The fastest one is, of course, 1, 2, 3. So anyway, the point is that knight is aiming at some very powerful squares. All right. Again, we're only concerned with the knight moves, so we're waiting to see what the knight's going to do. But it gets pretty complex here in a moment. All right, so this is actually basically the knight. Well, let me back up a little bit. The bishop was sacrificed so that the knight could come here guarded by the queen, because now this is a checkmate threat, because the knight would guard the queen. It also guards the square f7. If the king tried to run away like this, the knight actually prevents that from happening. So black offers the knight, or the rook for the knight. Black would love for this to happen, and maybe like this, bringing the knight back from the corner. But black missed this really cool move. So watch what happens. So basically we just, again, sacrificed a bishop for a pawn, but it's really about opening up this king and getting rid of his defenders. So now we have 2 knights ready to go. You see, we've got 2 knights that are doing some pretty good attacks. So here we are, check. And this rook comes up to come over like that. And then we get into a very interesting situation. So this is the position where black resigns, because the knights are attacking these squares and the white queen is attacking those squares. And the only way out of check is to give up your queen while your knight is under attack. This is not good. You would have to play like this to avoid checkmate right here. So they would go like this, but then you have this problem. You have a fork. So then they come here. Then we take the knight with check while guarding our knight. So again, the only moves they have are here and here. Probably here is better. And this is not a winning game for black. See, they're going to go here and get a second queen. So that is why they resigned right here, because they didn't want to have to do this move. Okay. Might be able to get through one more. Knight Tactics 3. So let's watch the 2 knights for black. This is also another chess player with a really long name. I thought Harshit would appreciate it. It is Kurt Paul Otto Joseph, or it might be Joseph, I'm not sure, Richter. Richter was a very good chess player a long time ago. He's one of my favorite players. So let's watch what the black knights do. So right here, this does not look like a scary knight move, and it actually isn't a super scary knight move if you understand it. However, black did not understand it. White did not understand it and plays this move, and this move kind of messes things up a little bit. So you'll see that both sides are developing their knights, and then white attacks the knight on c5, but black doesn't defend it, because if you take, that's checkmate, because there's a pin on the pawn. So like, I can't take the knight because that would put the white king in check. So this would be checkmate. So because black set up this threat and white saw it, white plays here, making space for the king and allowing the bishop to capture. But no problem. After the trades, now the white king cannot castle, and the knight is now in safety. So in this game actually went on for, I think it was an 88 move game, if I'm not mistaken. But I cut it short here just for a quicker example. Basically what happens is both sides just start developing normally, but white has more trouble because of those little knight maneuvers at the beginning. So again, I will point out that knights tend to do very well when they're supported by pawns, and they also tend to do very well when your opponent makes a lot of pawn moves and they're not developing pieces. This was not good for white. White basically just loses a pawn here for no reason. So my mouse has okay, for some reason this mouse sometimes freezes. It's weird. All right, so do we have any questions about how knights can be useful with pawns, or if too many pawns are used and that sort of thing? Today was just about showing some knight tactics that are kind of fun. I have a couple more knight tactics I can show just for fun. So on this one, we're paying attention to this knight right here on G1. I'm just going a little faster because we're shorter on time. So in this game, it actually looks like black is the one who has all the fancy knight moves, but this is not good. When those knights are almost defenseless against the queen. The bishop is holding that knight, but that's it. This is not good. So here we are. You see this knight is coming in, and it's a really basic tactic. See right here, this is a very common chess tactic. Basically, the black king is stalemated, and then the knight throws a check, forcing an unfavorable capture, which reveals a checkmate threat. So that gets parried by f6. And so this is kind of a striking position where you have two knights on the back row here. It's really funny how those two knights get captured, actually. So here we go. Threatening checkmate. This attack that white has is possible because of the knight sacrifices. But as you can see, black is actually running out of things they can do to the white king, and here they resign. Because there's really not much they can do. There's two different checkmate threats threatened. This one and this one. So you can't really defend both. You could probably check the king a little bit more, like you could take here. But eventually, like even right here, I don't think there's any more checks. Let's see, were there any other checks? You could do this check maybe. Yeah, but once you go here, once again, there's no more checks. So the game is going to be over. All right, last knight tactic, just because we can. We're watching black's knights this time. Okay, so there's the first move, threatening the queen. So you have to go this way. Knights in this position are often very dangerous against the opponent because they can come in a lot of different ways. So now we're down to one knight. Watch that knight. So attacking the queen, and then we have a fork on the king and the queen, so you have to take it, but then there's a pin. So no matter what happens, you lose your queen there. And then the rest of the game is basically brought to you by the knight sacrifices. So yeah. And basically, white just starts losing all these pawns, so they ended up resigning here. There's not a lot they can do. So anyway, 5 neat knight tactics that we hadn't shown you before. So there you go.